The one thing I do have is a green template, which I'm sure you all think is very subtle for an environmental journalism course. A couple of important things just as background. I'm a really heavy D2L user, and I want to echo the sentiment that Chang Wan expressed earlier about Mary Milkey. I probably would have quit in my second semester if it weren't for Mary. Mary is a tremendous help, and I call on her a number of times every semester to get things done. Yes, I know. This is the only important thing I have to say, Mary, the only important thing. And, so when Mary sends me emails and says, this is cool, or when she says, would you like to take a look at this? I always listen to Mary. And like Raquel, I'm in my tenure year this year, so last year was my year before my tenure year. And when Mary said, would you consider looking at this? I said, well, yeah, of course I would. But working on ePortfolio stuff as part of a pilot project was not real high on my radar. But because Mary is such a help, of course I did it. There are also some things that we were thinking about doing in our division, and I want to try to talk about those a little bit if we still have a little bit of time. We're trying to do some things with our curriculum, and we've talked about doing capstone courses, but at that point I didn't really see that they would happen. But as it turns out, they probably are going to happen. The other thing that's really important, of course, besides, well, actually, I think I've covered both important points. I do a lot of D2L stuff, heavy D2L user. Teach hybrid courses primarily. This course that I'm talking about was not technically a hybrid course, but I treat it as a hybrid course. It was a one-time-a-week course for about 2.5 hours, but I usually let them go halfway to 3/4 of the way through. My journalism classes, I really focus on writing and preparing for writing, doing all the things you need to do to get good writing and reporting done. And that's very much an individual task. And I can sit up here and talk about it all day long. They, of course, will stop listening after 5 minutes. But they need to go out and do those things. So I try to give them as much leeway. And D2L really helps with developing some self-directed sorts of projects, but giving them enough rules, guidelines to get those sorts of things going. So anyway, in a nutshell, that's Mary. This is me. I told you in my single illustration, then used. So, Communication 324. A journalism course, environmental journalism, some really important points. Pretty small class, juniors and seniors, 11 after a couple of people got scared away. Really important point. Very few of them, if any, had any real interest in practicing journalism. A couple of them were still thinking about it. A couple of them may have still been thinking about it at the end of the semester. But a lot of my journalism classes, a lot of our journalism courses are like that. We're not a full-blown journalism major. We're a track. And a lot of folks take our courses because they give, for instance, writing emphasis credit or environmental literacy credit. And this course gives both of those things. And I know that going into the course, that a lot of people may be much more interested in getting the WE credit for general degree requirement purposes than they will be in becoming journalists. So that has a lot to do with how we do things. Have some learning outcomes. Please don't read these. You can see that they're long. I tried to develop them well. They're very much tied toward the projects we do, which are in-depth reporting, researching, getting out, digging into sources, learning about different kinds of sources, different sorts of databases. So I tried to craft those pretty carefully, and they do tie into these projects that we do, and these were the primary projects for this course. Really, some of them had journalism experience, some of them had none. I tried to walk them through some basic sorts of journalism skills if they hadn't had them. Did a very limited number of things that would help them be familiar with at least the rudimentary skills of journalism, and then I tried to get them to do an in-depth project of some sort. They actually had 3 options for that. One was to do a research paper, one was to do a longer article or series of articles in journalistic style, and the third was actually to go to an international conference for the Society of Environmental Journalists, which was held here in Madison that year. So it was really a great opportunity for them to get some professional experience, and that's important because I encourage them to include several things from this list in their ePortfolio. ePortfolio otherwise had a really minor role in our class. The writing projects were the main things. Secondary stuff was D2L discussion boards, other tasks that were D2L centered, quizzes over the readings, that sort of thing. But the D2L was really just to take part in the pilot project, see what kinds of things I could learn to share with our department, help out the evaluation of the whole thing. So really I asked them very, very little. What I did ask of them was basically to take at least 3 artifacts from the list of projects that we had, so they could include coverage of the SEJ conference. I asked them to include their book reviews, which I asked them to write as if they were writing for a newspaper, a couple of other things, and then I had some reflections. I asked them to reflect on the course, skills they got out of the course, that sort of thing, and I asked them to reflect on the use of ePortfolio to provide a little bit of data and feedback for Mary and the folks in the project. So here are the reflection prompts that I gave them for the course. You can see that they're fairly detailed, but the one thing that I really learned is these are not detailed enough. And I'll show you just a couple of examples of that. And these are the short versions of the reflection prompts for the ePortfolio questions. Okay. Now I'm going to take a quick diversion here back to, I want to show you how I do discussions in my basic journalism course, because this really helps me to understand how I need to do the reflections in the ePortfolio. This is my set of basic instructions for our normal discussions in the basic journalism class. About 1,200 words. They freak out when they see it. But it's a semester-long project for them. It's something they have to do every week. And I say, look, it's understandable if you read it, you work through the models. I give them models. I write posts for them. I have lots and lots of additional information, a schedule they have to follow. It really is overwhelming, and I know that. There's extra information down here on how to do the forums, including rubrics on how those will be graded. I have a file here on what makes a good critical thinking question, because this is a very important part of our critical thinking outcomes for this course. So as you can see, I've got lots and lots of detail as to exactly what I look for in my discussion boards. These are the things I did not do with ePortfolio reflection questions, and that's really, really important here. Okay, so what do we find? There's nothing here that Matt didn't already show you in that first presentation. The reflections are nothing surprising. Here's one where the student talked about understanding that she needed to get out and talk to a lot more people afterwards, okay? But again, nothing surprising there, much more typical. And in this, I cut and paste straight out of ePortfolio, okay? Warts and all. So you'll see this in this one. You'll see it in the next one. Now, I'm a journalist by nature, so I'm cynical by nature. I also have a PhD, so I can sit around and pick things apart. So I see stuff like this, and I go, okay, this is a lot of words, but you're really not telling me anything. You didn't tell me anything about how you met the learning outcomes. Sure, you said you're going to work harder, but you say that after every class, because I know you didn't do it in my class. I told you every week, get started on your interviews, talk to the people, get it done. Of course, they didn't do it, and then they give me this reflection that says, you know, I'm not going to be so unprepared next time. And that's great. They're honest. Our students are very honest about these sorts of things. But really, I didn't come up with much that was interesting or different in the assessments, in the reflections. And that's the stuff that I really want to talk about here. Here's some of the stuff that they wrote about ePortfolio. Again, nothing surprising. Basically, they really, really liked it. So these are nutshell summaries of the basic responses. The only thing that anybody ever even had any sort of problem with was this notion of what's a collection as opposed to a presentation. Fairly simple stuff to explain and get past. Now, the thing that was really, really interesting, the thing that I found that I got the most out of in terms of reflection really didn't have anything to do with either the outcomes for the class or for the ePortfolio, but it was some real honest reflection that came out of it. And this was from a gentleman who went to the SEJ conference where there was a lot of stuff going on. Al Gore was the keynote speaker. He was attacked by a gentleman in the question session, and that made international news. There was a lot of really great stuff going on there. And he did some deadline coverage, because this was their job. Go cover some sessions, do the deadline coverage. We're going to post it on the SEJ website. I'm going to edit your stuff Professional journalists are going to edit your stuff and look at it before it goes on the website. It has to be good. These are the world's foremost experts on these things. And he did great with his deadline coverage, but this is what he was thinking about. This is really interesting. I had to stand up in front of an audience and tape stuff. Okay? So this is some really interesting reflection, and it showed me that, and this is unprompted and unscripted. I asked him, tell me about your experiences, what you learned. There's a lot of great stuff in there, and I think one of the things that we're really concerned with in a group that is a grant-funded group now at UWSP. How am I doing on time anyway? Fast. Sorry. So I'm not going to call on Rhonda to tell us about what she's doing. Maybe Mark will get to do that. Here's basically what I've learned. These are my reflections, okay? Students like it. It's easy to use. We know that. But the really important thing for our purposes is all this assessment stuff. So it's good that I'm at the end because we're going to be talking about assessment here in a bit. And what I've really learned is that akin to my discussion instructions, you can write prompts that have lots and lots of detail, but they have to be the right kinds of details, and you have to walk your students through this. And I think there's a real tension between leading them to the answers and letting them think for themselves so that you get some of that authentic kind of discussion. And Lorna talked about authentic assessment earlier, and that's a word that I sort of agonized over as I was going through this. How would I describe or characterize the kind of reflection I'm looking for from them? And it's that authentic assessment. But to write the kinds of prompts you need, I think we do need to refer them back to those learning outcomes, and we see that several of you have done that in the presentations that you've given us. We need to really make sure that we direct them as much as we can, but still allow them that leeway to answer in a very authentic way. So, give them detailed instructions, maybe not as detailed as my discussion board instructions, but every one of those is based on mistakes that they have made. So I always write a new one every time they make a new mistake. We have to refer back to those outcomes, and we have to leave room for that authentic reflection. That's pretty much it. What questions or comments do you have? I know I went over time. Sorry about that. I talked fast. No questions? Break time?